Zimmerman.
No, Zimmerman, he is...
Everything's so red for Zimmerman.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, he's...
Yeah, repeal and I think we could write a few.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started here.
Okay.
All right. What's this all about?
Okay, Kathy, you're the chaplain. Could you have a prayer for us?
Sure.
Someone coming?
No,
Oh, okay.
that was us making noises.
Nobody coming.
I think my cane fell.
Lord, we thank you so much that we can gather tonight and learn about our precious Constitution. We want to preserve this, Lord, because we know that you gave it to us. And we just thank you that you'll be with us tonight, help us to learn, be with Tom. And we thank you for your so many blessings that we can live in a nation, one nation under God. And it's in your precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
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 Pockets.
Okay, we left off at Article 5.
Yes, we
I already forgot.
Before we go any further, does anybody have any questions on stuff we've already gone over? Any questions at all?
I had one answer. Remember I asked the question, or I mentioned that.
She always says an answer.
Well, I got the answer to the question that I said, is it true that the Supreme Court, that the judges don't have to pay income tax? Only the Supreme Court judges don't.
They do not pay.
They don't have to. And the reason is they thought that it would be a conflict of interest.
If they have.
If they had to pay income
I
tax?
looked it up, they
I
do
think
not
it's
pay income
conflict of
taxes.
interest.
Why?
They voted themselves
They
not to
voted
pay.
themselves.
Wouldn't you? I
not
would
to
vote
pay.
me on
This is true.
No,
That was
wow,
right.
okay.
I don't think people
You don't think, that's the Supreme Court, like,
Supreme
The
Court.
9 of them, they don't
All
pay.
The 9 of them, they don't pay income
They don't
tax.
pay income tax.
I'm going to vote Sanderson's don't pay
Well,
either.
why would the
And
Congress
they're
be
in for
different or
life.
the President be different?
You know?
Well, they don't pay theirs either.
They make the
As
final
guys
decision,
here-
I would assume.
Yeah, they're the
They might
highest
say
court,
it
they
so
make
that
decisions
wouldn't
on
have to,
things, so.
Pay the tax.
Want to hear why this doesn't work? I'll give you an example quickly. One of my patients and friends was a surgeon who was in Europe. And his department at the hospital had a lawsuit. He got sued too, because he was on the staff.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to defend himself, so he thought that was wrong. And he was very rich, so he started suing. How can you sue a man who's out of the country? He got to the Supreme Court, and you know what the judgment was? I'll make it quick.
What?
We have to go along with the ability to sue you whether or not you're there, because if we let you win in this suit, you know, that the lawyer was wrong, then lawyers would be afraid to sue you. He says, but I'm afraid to work on patients because of you. The Supreme Court said if they did that, then lawyers would be hesitant to sue other doctors.
I can't believe.
He wasn't even in the friggin' country, he was in Germany.
So,
I'm not saying he paid in the end, but he had help until the end.
Yeah.
so in essence then,
They are the
the
best.
judges, the Supreme Court judges, they're saying, the only reasoning I can see is that they're saying that if they had to pay taxes and they could not make fair judgments on tax issues.
Taxation.
But what about everything else then?
Well, that's a good question, yeah, because it could be other things.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I understand. I heard tonight that Elena Kagan might have to recuse herself on one of those things that's coming up.
Yeah, she was on the committee.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Obamacare.
But it's interesting.
Yeah, that's right. That was what
She did not.
No, we
Now you know something you wish you did.
Yeah, was going to.
I think with Congress, they pass
That's, I just
But
heard
his
it.
opinion was courts don't work,
They can
because
just-
all courts are made up of lawyers who
Yes,
make
they
all
will.
the
See, we don't
decisions.
say that.
You should have lay people in courts.
Article 5, yeah.
Okay, let's
Okay.
go ahead here.
Sorry.
That's all right. Article 5. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which, in either case, shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by the conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of the first article. That has to do with the importation of slaves. Yeah, I know, it's kind of like, wow.
My head is spinning.
Anyways, without its consent, shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. Now, what they were talking about there was like in the Constitution, they included a thing where 20 years after the ratification of the Constitution, the slave trade was outlawed. Now, until that time, there was a tax of like $10 a head on every slave brought into the country. This is kind of like a compromise reached between the southern states and the northern states. You got to remember, at the Constitutional Convention, there was a lot of haggling going on because everybody wanted something. And this was, they had to give and take and all that. And this is something that they gave to them, was that. They allowed, they didn't want slavery to begin with, but they had to go along with it to get the southern states to go along. So what they did was they did this. 20 years past the date of the ratification of the Constitution, the slave trade was outlawed. It's like, let me give you an example here. In the Federalist Papers, I already have it marked out here. Okay. To provide for the amendments to the Constitution. Okay, the way they had this, a way to introduce them was required. The way preferred by the convention seems totally proper. It guards against an extremely easy amendment process that would make the Constitution too mutable or too inconsistent, an extremely difficult process that would preserve the faults discovered within it. In other words, what they wanted to do was whenever they made it like 3/4 of the states and all that, they made it hard. It's not easy to amend the Constitution, but it can be done. But the reason they didn't want it too easy was that, like, one day the Constitution means this, and then the next day it means something else, and it's like you can't follow anything. There's no consistency to it.
That's true.
But if there is a flaw in the Constitution, if they discover something in it, then there's a process available to change it. That was their thinking behind that.
That makes sense.
So, like I said, it made pretty good sense to me. Any questions on that?
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
I kept hearing about, like a year or two ago in emails, people talking about us having, I don't know if it was a constitutional convention or what, of all the states, whether they were talking about doing another amendment to the Constitution, but they said it's very hard to bring about a majority of the states to do this type of convention. And I don't know, it was probably within Obama's reign. So I don't know what they were referring to, but they obviously must have been talking about doing an amendment to the Constitution.
They could have been. I didn't hear anything about that. Like it says here, 3/4 of the states, like currently, as I believe, it takes like 37 states to ratify an amendment to the Constitution. So if 37 states call for a Constitution, then we could put an amendment, but it would have to pass through the Congress, and then the Senate, and then the President would have to sign it, and it has to be submitted to the 37 states. Well, it has to be submitted to all 50 states,
Or 37.
and 37 have to approve it.
All 57.
All 57?
Yeah, 57.
All 57 states. How many have to bring it about?
2/3. Currently, that's 37 states, I
37,
believe.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I don't remember what it was about, but I got excited about that because I thought, gosh, you know, this is states' rights. We could do this if we get 37 states, and then of course 26 came about. Obamacare, trying to overthrow that.
Yeah.
I think he was trying to do away with the internet. It's ruining the truth is out.
That could be.
Yeah, well,
Not 2/3.
I think we still have one that has been kicking around for quite some time, and that I think is the Equal Rights Amendment. And we have not been able to get 37 states to agree to that, which really is a shame because what it did was what it's supposed to do was to make sure that women got treated the same as men when it came to pay and other things like that.
Doris, just think about what you just said. Women treated exactly the same way as men. You want that? Think about that.
Well, I'm talking about the fact that...
The good stuff.
Yeah, basically I'm talking about...
Right, go ahead.
Pay and things along those lines, okay?
Right.
And the reason I say that is I remember years ago when, in fact, I guess it was when we were first married, which was a long time ago, 58 years ago, they would not accept my wages to give us credit for buying, say, furniture or anything along those lines, or even buying a house.
They didn't
no credit.
They didn't add you to the income of the house?
No.
they didn't.
No.
Well, you know, that could have been something to do with because you could get pregnant, then you couldn't work.
Oh, right, but there's a whole stupid things. You know, I remember we came back from Okinawa in '64, and my husband said he was sick and tired of paying somebody else's house payment. I said, well, we can go down and see if they'll take my money now. So we went down to a local realtor, and I said, I suppose you won't count my earnings, because I had worked all the time. I was over there. I've been very little time that I haven't worked in my career. I had 32 and a half years federal government service. And they said, oh no, we have to take it now.
Okay.
So something came up. I don't know where it was. It wasn't certainly an amendment to the...
Could it have been part of the Civil Rights Act? I don't know.
I don't know.
I was just going to say that. That sounds like civil rights.
Maybe it was in '64. I don't know.
I think they should have, but I do
Maybe
see
we
their
got
point,
something
because
in that one,
if a
too.
woman is pregnant, she can't work, and then that would change,
Oh, baloney.
they could lose the house.
Okay, but now, can I point out one thing here? Like, now, we talked about this at the last meeting, on the Equal Rights Amendment. Like, for what I understand, women are to be treated exactly the same manner as men. Now, you think about that real hard, because there have been a lot of laws passed with the best of intentions, and you see how somebody finds a way to twist that law around and use it in a way in which it was never meant to be used. So, you know, it's like, be careful what you wish for. Like unisex bathrooms for a starter, you know, or like unisex showers. I'm not saying that it will happen, but it could. It's like,
Well, it does in the colleges already.
right?
I don't approve of that at all.
No.
When I went to Northwestern, you got caught in the girls' floor, you weren't going to Northwestern the next day.
Yeah.
My friend found out.
That's like the Americans with Disabilities Act. There was a guy that sued under that because he wore glasses and he wanted to have a handicap plate, and he got a handicap license plate because he wore glasses.
Oh, wow, gee.
There was another woman that sued under that because she couldn't pass the bar exam for New York State within 3 hours. She needed an exemption, so they had to give her as much time as she needed to take the test.
That could take weeks or so.
Yeah.
Obama still hasn't.
And it's like, you know, what kind of a lawyer is she going to be? But just like, you know, it's just something to think about. Like, you know, I totally agree with you. Women should be treated the same as men as far as pay and wages and all that go. But you think about the wording of that. Women are to be treated in exactly the same manner as men. You got to watch
Drafted.
that. Right, oh yes, drafted, and
Well,
you get the nice haircut when you first go into the military, like I did, like Sully did, and then make you pay for it.
That's what happened to his hair. See?
Don't touch my hair.
It's still the same.
Any questions on Article 5 at all?
I don't think so.
I have a
Yes.
question. Judy's not here tonight, but she wanted me to ask a question. It has to do with 2/3 majority vote, but it has to do with the UN treaty, and I don't know if you want to talk about that at this point.
I really don't know anything. UN treaties have to be, all treaties, they have to be by the President with the consent of with the Senate can sign treaties.
She found this, and so she sent it to me. She says the UN treaty coming up for discussion regarding small arms limitations. You know, that's
Oh, yes.
Hillary
I
said.
saw that.
According to Wikipedia, the Senate has to have a 2/3 majority of the senators present. The only sleight of hand could be if all the GOP senators stayed home. I don't think all Dems would vote for it either, but I want to make sure I'm not wishful thinking. So I wonder what would happen in a case like that.
That's a good question. I personally don't answer to the UN. I answer to the Constitution. I think he might have a war on us. Like he might. like you saw with Obamacare, you had 26 states file a lawsuit. That's an example of like the federal government usurping its power and the states stepping in, like say, "Oh no, you ain't doing that." Like what they did with Obamacare. If they try something like that, I would say that's time for the states to step in and say, "No, you're not going to do that. We don't answer to the UN."
Yeah,
As far as I know, this is our ultimate authority, not the UN.
The UN's on its
Of course, they're
way.
working on that, though.
I'm sure they are. Oh, I don't doubt that for a minute. But you see, it's like where you have to stay on guard against them all the time because they're always trying to find some way to do something. It's like what they did with the healthcare thing, the 26 states.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they had in mind, the framers of the Constitution. When the federal government usurps its authorities, it's up to the states to step in and stop them from doing it. That's a textbook example of what they did there. And if they try to pass some kind of a treaty against small arms fire, it would be the state's obligation to step in and say, "No, you're not going to do this."
yeah, yes, I think I saw that email.
It's so they can disarm us.
Yes, through the United Nations.
Right, through the United Nations.
The
That's-
United Nations is not recognized.
I know,
We may
but
be
that's
party,
their-
we may
that's
be
their
party to it,
intent.
but like this is the highest
I know,
law of the land.
I know, but that's their intent of why they're.
Yeah, that's their intent. That's what they want to do. Well, they don't like guns. I mean, they tried getting them thrown out, and they didn't succeed at that. Even a lot of liberal lawyers said, sorry, like the Second Amendment says you can have guns, they want you to answer to the UN. They're just trying to find a way to take guns away from people.
They have to take away religion and guns and honor, then they can take over the world.
Right.
This is the Illuminati, the whatever you want to call them.
Yeah,
And it
this
ain't
is-
going to work, trust me.
This
No,
is
you see,
what-
that's
too
like,
damn many guns.
that's where the states would have to stand up, and like a lot of states I can think of, like Wyoming, Idaho, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, they're going to be like, screw you. You try to take their guns, they'll be using you for target practice.
Charlton Heston out of my dead hand.
Yeah, exactly. Now they might try that, but I would say that'd be an example of the states
Well, I
like
hope not.
Obamacare where they filed a lawsuit against. That's what I would say.
There's too many people alive that saw what happened in Europe. First thing Hitler did was disarm the people.
That's
Burn
right.
the churches, kill all the learned.
That's right.
Everybody's done. It won't work. There's
No,
enough
they
of us around.
Well, I just hope that a lot people pay attention to what is going on in this
Yeah.
country.
Well,
Because they gotta wake up
Lots
first
of
before they
us.
can pay attention.
The
Well, I
NRA is
know,
very
but-
strong.
There's
Very
so
strong.
many.
And that Agenda 21 is really,
It's scary.
it's a terrible thing.
Okay. Everybody, any more questions on Article 5? Okay, let's go on to Article 6 then. Article 6. All debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation. This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. The senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution, but no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust in the United States. Okay, that's several clauses we went through here. Let's get back to the first clause here. All debts contracted and engagements entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation. Now, they adopted this probably to satisfy foreign creditors. The United States, at the end of the American Revolution, was very deep in debt. We owed a fortune to the Dutch and the French because it cost us a lot of money during the Revolution. And the foreign creditors were very worried about the United States paying back what they owed. They were afraid that we were going to try to pull a fast one, like say, oh, that doesn't exist anymore, we don't have to pay you. But the framers of the Constitution were smart. They knew that if they screwed them over, there might come a time very shortly where, hey, we need to borrow money, and like, no, sorry, we ain't loaning you anymore, you screwed us. So they wisely adopted those debts and said, we're going to pay these debts, and the foreign creditors saw this, like, okay, they're trying to make an effort to pay their debts, so like, they were cool with us, and they continued to loan us money. It's like declaring bankruptcy. You declare bankruptcy, you might get out of paying your debts, and you go try and buy something, it ain't happening. That's with that. Okay. The Constitution, the next clause, This Constitution and the laws of the United States shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or the laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. Okay, now you just go ahead, Vicki.
I was just going to say, see that first part of that
Yes.
clause, as you go down and it says, states shall be made in pursuant thereof, all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be supreme law of the land.
Right, right. I agree with you there. Yeah, I agree. But you see, this is something that may take, like, treaties are treated as law.
Yes.
But you see, I guess this would depend on a court's interpretation here. In my interpretation, the Constitution ranks higher than a treaty does. Now, a judge might see things differently. This is something that the courts might have to work out, because I see what you're talking about here, because I'm kind of wondering about that myself. That's something I didn't look into. But it's like, as far as I know, like, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Even though treaties are all valid and all that, this is the ultimate authority, is the Constitution.
They should ask the Indians.
What's that? What did you say?
Ask the Indians about treaties.
Yeah, there's an example right there. We made a lot of treaties with the Indians. We broke them. So
Yep, that's right.
that's an excellent. I thank you for bringing that up. That's an excellent example.
Yep.
This is their country.
It was. You know.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, he screwed them over big time.
That's right. Right.
Okay, the third clause here.
Not happy about it.
The senators and representatives before mentioned and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive and judicial officers, both the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution, but no religious test shall be required as a qualification of public trust. So that's pretty much, we all know what that means. Like, you know, you take an oath, I solemnly swear to uphold, support, and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Like, when the president takes the oath of office, I believe that senators and representatives take the same oath. But like you see, when I took an oath, when I enlisted in the Air Force and I took an oath, I supported uphold the Constitution. I never said anything about treaties or anything like that. It was the Constitution. So, and I'm sure Sully had the same experience. So it's like, for me, that's the ultimate law, is the Constitution. Like you said, treaties, that's interesting to have this in here. But like, treaties are treated as the law of the land. It said that in the Federalist Papers because it had to be. But it's also like, the Constitution is the ultimate authority. Like, when you go to court to decide something, they're not going to say, well, this UN treaty takes precedence over the Constitution. That's what I would say, but who knows how justices are going to think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's true.
This is interesting, which I never realized. It said no religious test.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking, Marilyn.
Yeah.
And my goodness, that really makes it interesting, because we've been talking about being Christian and having to be Christian, or so anybody, you know, you don't have to be a Christian.
No, anybody. Like, you can be a Christian, you can be a Jewish, you can be a Muslim, you can be
Quakers.
Quaker, any religion at all. Yeah, Mormon. You can be a Mormon.
They don't want a Mormon. You know, they want to make. They're going to make that.
Well, but that, I didn't realize that was in here.
Yeah. Any questions on that?
No.
Yeah.
But I thought
Yes,
that
a
was
question?
really
What's
good.
a public trust?
A public trust is when you hold public office. Like, if you're a state representative, if you're a congressman, if you're a senator, the president, that's an office of public trust. Any questions? Anything else? Have we got any questions on anything? Okay. On to Article 7. The ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between the states, so ratifying the same. Done in convention by unanimous consent of the states present the 17th day of September in the year of our Lord 1887, and in the independence of the United States, the 12th in witness whereof we have hereunto subscribed our names. Now, one thing I want to point out here, if you notice, there's only 12 states. There were 13 states. Only 12 are listed here.
What was the 13th?
13th one was Rhode Island. They refused to participate in it.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
That's right.
They wanted to be independent.
Rhode Island was the only state to boycott the Constitutional Convention.
Wow.
They didn't want to be a part of it because they thought it was going to overthrow the already established government. They liked the Articles of Confederation, and they wanted nothing to do with it. They were like, the heck with this, because they saw it as a strong central government. It frightened them. They didn't like that. They wanted states' rights.
It's being proven they were right in the first place.
You know what? It's in a way you're right, because we didn't, not us, our ancestors did not pay attention to it like they should have. Okay. Now, also, if you notice here, there's all the names on my copy of the Constitution, everyone who signed it. One little point of interest here, for New York, they have Alexander Hamilton. Now, Hamilton was not authorized to sign for the state of New York. The two representatives that New York sent to the Constitutional Convention left early, because they went there strictly to ratify. They went there under the premise that they were going to fix the Articles of Confederation. But they figured out real quickly that, like Madison and Hamilton and the rest of them had in mind creating an entirely new government, and they wanted no part of that. They liked the Articles of Confederation. They didn't want the Constitution. So they left, so Hamilton signed his name for himself, but they listed him under New York.
Yeah, well, of course, that was one of the things that most of these papers are directed to New York, you know, to the people of the state of New York, because they were one of the big holdouts on this whole thing.
Right, exactly.
And so that was what they were trying to do.
Okay. They're over here in convention, Monday, September 17, 1787. Okay, present the states of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Mr. Okay, they listed it here. Mr. Hamilton from New York. Okay, I stand corrected. They did point that out. Because he was not authorized to do that, to act on behalf of New York. New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Resolved that the preceding Constitution be laid before the United States in Congress assembled, and that it is the opinion of this convention that it should afterwards be submitted to a convention of delegates chosen in each state by the people thereof, under the recommendation of its legislature for their assent and ratification, and that each convention assenting to and ratifying the same should give notice thereof to the United States in Congress assembled. Resolved, that it is the opinion of this convention that as soon as the conventions of 9 states shall have ratified this Constitution, the United States in Congress assembled should fix a day on which electors should be appointed by the states which shall have ratified the same, and a day on which the electors should assemble to vote for president, and a time and place for commencing proceedings under this Constitution. Any questions there? Okay, let's go on to the next part here. That after such publication, the electors should be appointed, and the senators and representatives elected. That the electors should meet on the day fixed for the election of president, and should transmit their votes, certified, signed, sealed, and as directed, as the Constitution requires, to the Secretary of the United States in Congress assembled. That the senators and representatives should convene at the time and place assigned. That the senators should appoint a president of the Senate for the sole purpose of receiving, opening, and counting the votes for president, and that after he shall be chosen, the Congress, together with the president, should without delay proceed to execute this Constitution. By order of the unanimous order of the convention, George Washington, President, W. Jackson, Secretary. Okay, so like this was the day that they finished the Constitutional Convention. It ran for like 4 months. It ran from May 14th until September 17th of 1787. Any questions on that? Okay. Once the Constitution, as soon as they finished it and they sent it to the states, immediately there was opposition to it. A lot of opposition to it. Some of the states felt that they weren't getting a good deal out of it, like New York. Like you brought up, Doris, a lot of these letters in the Federalist Papers are directed to New York. New York didn't like the Constitution. They liked the Articles of Confederation. One of their sticking points that they didn't like was that they wanted the number of senators for each state to be equal to the number of congressmen. Yeah. Like you have Florida, you have like 25 congressmen or 27 congressmen from Florida. Well, the way they wanted it, you would have had 27 senators from Florida. But the smaller states wouldn't go along with that, so they made a compromise. I believe it was called the Connecticut Compromise, where each state got 2 senators. That way, there was equal representation for the state, whereas in the House, it was a people's representation, depending on how many people you had in there. It was the way of dividing power. But they didn't like that. They weren't happy with that. It also didn't have a Bill of Rights. That was something else that a lot of them complained about. They said that the Constitution did not go far enough to express what their rights were. They wanted their rights spelled out in black and white. Now, Alexander Hamilton argued bitterly against the Bill of Rights. He said that it was unnecessary, that it was even dangerous. If you put out, you have the, just because something says you don't have the right to do this, that just because you specifically don't have a right written down doesn't mean that you don't have it, or to that effect. It was complicated the way he explained it, and people were like, that's not good enough. They wanted it written out in black and white. These are my rights. I want these rights. And anyways, there were two factions that came out fighting about the Constitution. There was the Federalists, which included Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, George Washington, and there were the Anti-Federalists. Patrick Henry was one, give me liberty or give me death. He was an extreme Anti-Federalist. And Governor George Clinton of New York was also an Anti-Federalist. And it was a lot of the Federalist papers that they had written that were directed to New York because they were writing the Anti-Federalist papers at the same time that they were. But anyways, the Constitution went forward to the states, and the states called ratification, and the states held conventions to ratify it. Connecticut became the first state to ratify the Constitution. That's like you ever see Connecticut, not Connecticut, Delaware, excuse me, I'm sorry.
I was going to say.
Delaware became the first state to ratify the Constitution. Like if you see Delaware, the first state, that's what it means. It was the first state to ratify the Constitution. I didn't know that until I looked it up online. And then after Delaware, I believe it was Pennsylvania, and then state after state after state ratified it until New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify the Constitution on June 21st, 1788. And then the Constitution officially went into effect. Now, even though they ratified it, they and several other states went along with it, but they said that they wanted amendments added to it. Because they said, we'll go along with this the way it is, but we want some stuff added to it. So like, okay, but they went along with it. Now, once the Constitution became the law of the land, the states that hadn't ratified it, like New York and Rhode Island, went into panic mode. They got scared because they thought they were going to be left out in the cold because everybody else was being part of something and they were left out. And like New York City was the capital of the federal government, they would have had to pull it out of there. They were worried about it. So they had their constitutional convention in New York to talk about it. And the Anti-Federalists kept yelling about it, but the Anti-Federalists, a couple of them finally caved in and they agreed to ratify it. So by a very narrow margin, they ratified the Constitution. I had it written down, I don't remember where it is. But they ratified the Constitution and it became there. And then the last state to ratify it was Rhode Island. Rhode Island wanted nothing to do with it because they were the last one to do it. They were like, you know, we got to do something here, so they went along with it. But they said the same thing that other states did. We want something in addition to this. They want something more than just the Constitution. Any questions?
Doing good.
What?
Okay.
So that was a year, and you said June to, this was September? Well, no, not
May
quite, not quite a
14th
year.
to September, about 4 months to September 1787.
Interesting. Because I had to learn by horseback, I guess, the information.
Yeah.
Or didn't have telegraph back then.
No, they did not. Everything had to go by horseback.
So maybe that was quick.
But that was quick, yeah.
Well, I know there was a statement at the beginning of the Federalist Papers telling about the fact that there were 4 states that were they really had to go after. 4 states were crucial to the success of any new government: Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Virginia, and New York. And
Right.
New York was the most difficult case with the strongest opposition.
New York had a lot of opposition. The governor,
Yeah, that's what they say.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they say the leading figure in New York politics, Governor George Clinton, was considered an opponent of the plan, and they had to carve carved an independent course under the Articles, which alienated neighbor states and enriched itself by trade and tariff measures, and they had an awful lot to lose in the short run. So they did say that Alexander Hamilton, though, they had. They had actually John Jay, and Hamilton, and there was the other fellow in
Madison.
Madison wasn't from, no, Madison was not from New York.
Oh, no, he was from Virginia. I'm
He was
sorry.
from Virginia,
He
yes.
wrote the Federalist Papers.
Yeah, I've been to his house along with the others, yeah, that's right. But Alexander Hamilton evidently was from New York.
That was his adopted state, yeah.
Yeah, because he came from,
Wasn't he from Barbados or down?
yeah,
He was from the West Indies,
West
yeah.
Indies, yeah.
He was born and raised in the West Indies, and he lived there until he became a young adult, and he came to the United States. Well, it wasn't the United States when he came here, but...
Yeah. It says perhaps no.
So he was French?
No, West Indies at that time, I don't know.
I don't exactly know what his nationality. He was born in the West Indies. I remember reading that. And a hurricane came through, and he left to avoid a hurricane, and he just never went back.
Interesting. John James. Yeah, that's what they were talking about, yeah.
Any questions on anything we've covered so far?
No.
Okay. Okay, the Bill of Rights. That was proposed by James Madison in the year 1789. It was done, like I said, to placate the states that were upset that they felt the Constitution hadn't gone far enough. Okay, right here now, this next step, page 20 in the little book. Congress of the United States, begun and held at the city of New York on Wednesday, the 4th of March, 1789. The conventions of a number of the states, having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. And as extended, the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. Resolved by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled, 2/3 of both houses concurring, with the following articles being proposed to the legislatures of the several states as amendments to the Constitution of the United States, all or any of which articles, when ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures, to be valid to all intents and purposes as part of the said Constitution. And whatever that "viz" means, I don't know. Articles in addition to an amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America proposed by the Congress and ratified by the legislatures of the several states pursuant to the 5th article of the original Constitution. And then Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg, Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Adams, Vice President of the United States, President of the Senate. And it's attested here. Okay, down here at the bottom, on September 25th, 1789, Congress transmitted to the state legislatures 12 proposed amendments, 2 of which having to do with congressional representation and congressional pay were not adopted. The remaining 10 amendments became the Bill of Rights.
Ah, that's what it was, okay. Because I didn't realize those were.
Any questions on that? Like I said, there are a lot of the states that went along with ratifying the Constitution. They were concerned about it. They went along with it like, okay, we like this, but we want some extra restrictions. They wanted everything spelled out in black and white. These are my rights. I have this. I have that right. Like in New Hampshire, whenever they ratified the Constitution, they specifically put a thing in it that they wanted something in the Constitution to say we have the right to own firearms. That was interesting to read. That was specifically written into their ratification.
Now that became our amendment too. Well, no, wait a minute. The right of the people to keep and bear arms.
Any questions on any of that so far? All right.
It's taken quite a while to get that done though, wasn't it?
It took a while.
Yeah, 2 years, almost 2 years.
Okay, the First Amendment to the Constitution. Does anybody know what the 5 freedoms are? Wait, first let's read this here. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of the speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of their grievances. Well, there's your answer right there.
Yeah. Well, Obama, what he just did.
What's that?
You wonder when he gets the First Amendment.
347.
He didn't get that far yet.
Okay.
He hasn't read that page yet.
What page is that?
Number 1, he hasn't read anything.
Oh, no, he ain't read this.
He's
no.
saying he doesn't know this. How come? He was bragging again. 11 years he was a professor of law, constitutional.
Constitutional law,
I don't
yeah.
think he could spell the word.
He wasn't a professor.
I know he wasn't.
What did they call him?
Instructor.
He gave lectures occasionally.
An instructor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was an instructor in biology at college, so that makes me a professor of biology, right?
Yeah.
I'm just as much that as he is.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Yes, go, yeah.
Okay, okay, in the Federalist Papers, there was one reference to that I liked. It was written by James Madison. I'll find it here. I had it marked out. There was a statement in here. Despite the military establishments in several kingdoms of Europe, which are as large as the public resources will bear, the government is afraid to trust people with arms, and it is not certain with this aid alone that they will be able to shake off their yokes. But if the people possess the additional advantage of local governments, wait, that's not what I wanted to show you. There was something in here I had marked out. Wait a second, I'm sorry to hold you guys up, I had this down. It was the only statement I saw in the Federalist Papers regarding the right to own firearms. Any questions on that, by the way, while we're looking here?
You know, there's always the argument, you know, that it was really meant for, not for the people, right?
Right, they argue that it was meant for like militias, like National Guard and things like
The
that.
militia, and they're where you know, you're in Auschwitz,
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
Or worse.
or worse.
Or Russia.
exactly.
There's an
Without
argument
arms-
that it's not the
Without
right
arms,
of
this
the
country would
people.
be gone already.
There's an argument that that doesn't mean that it's not the right
They
of
say,
the people.
like they take different
Of the people
words,
in the
different
National
meanings.
Guard.
You see, because they wrote it differently, the right of the
Right,
people to
right.
own fire, keep and bear arms, or a well-regulated militia, they talk about that, and like they use one individual words to say like, okay, this means a militia, this means you can't have guns, this means like the National Guard. It's like nickel and that's like nitpicking things.
Military.
Oh.
Right, yeah.
England would still be here if the farmers didn't have arms back then.
Was
Right.
it number 41, maybe?
Was it number 41?
I don't know.
Military.
Seems
I
like
had
it's toward
that
the
written
end.
down here because I kept quoting
Because
that.
that was
I remember you
Madison,
talking about it, it seemed like it was toward
Right,
the end of
46,
the...
section 9.
46-9.
Yeah.
Imagine if the criminals in St. Pete and burglars got to vote on whether we could carry arms. The only ones that don't want you to have them are people that are going to do something bad.
Oh, here it is. This, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. It may be doubted whether this kind of militia could ever be conquered by such a proportion of regular troops. Those best acquainted with the last successful resistance of this country against British arms will be most inclined to deny the possibility. Besides the advantage of being armed, which Americans possess, unlike the people of almost every other nation, the existence of state governments to which the people are attached, by which the militia officers are appointed, forms a barrier against enterprises of ambition that is more insurmountable than any which a simple government of any form could admit of. I don't want to read the whole thing because it's like it's long-winded, but basically it's like, remember that from the Federalist Papers?
Well, I
Remember
was
that?
looking
I
at,
remember when you found it, you were talking
Yeah.
about it.
Because that was the only reference I ever saw made to firearms in the Federalist Papers. They mentioned how Americans have the advantage of owning firearms. No one else in the world is allowed to. Other than that, I never saw any mention of it.
I mean, no other country in the world are allowed to have guns except the military?
As far as I know at that time, yeah.
What about in today's world?
probably not.
Where?
In today's world, she's saying, I don't really know.
Oh, in today's world? That's a good question. I think maybe Canadians are allowed to own firearms. I don't know.
England.
England's not allowed to own firearms. I don't believe any country in Europe can own firearms.
Sure, in Russia, they don't want that.
Well, Switzerland does, I know that.
Switzerland, they give them
They
to
give them
everybody.
guns to
Everybody's
Yeah.
given a gun here.
Oh, God.
Well, Switzerland, they have everybody serves in the militia, though. Yeah.
That's why they're all trained.
Well, that wouldn't be a bad idea here either. I mean,
Right.
let's just have one. disagree with the fact that everybody should go into service for 1 or 2 years.
Oh, definitely.
You know, it would make the kids grow up. I'd like mine to grow up.
I don't know about that. I'm kind of thinking like, yeah.
You were in. Did you feel like it did you any good?
It did me a world of good
I have
in
a
the
friend
service.
who
Yeah, I
said
matured a lot in the service. Yeah, I agree.
One of my best friends said he'd be nothing without the service.
Like when you go into service, they don't treat you like a kid. Like you to get with the program, they burn you, and they have no trouble burning you if you screw up.
That's right.
And like 99% of the guys I saw, like they come in and like once they read you the riot act a couple of times to get their act straightened out, they're fine. It's just that 1%, and they're screw-ups in civilian life or military.
My buddy was hell on wheels because his family was rich, and he said the only thing that kept him alive to this day is he had to go into service.
I think what an opportunity it is for a lot of guys that can't pay for college. That's how my husband got through school.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
That was
he
something they should
graduated one night from high school, and he was in the military the next.
Yeah.
That's what makes me mad about that Trayvon Martin. A lot of 17-year-olds served in World War I and II.
Yes.
My husband's grandfather got his mother to lie about his age.
Yeah.
And a lot of them did for World War I.
Yeah.
Believe me, at 17, you're no baby.
No, you're not.
That's true.
I wasn't.
I doubt you can do that anymore, but a lot did back then.
Yeah.
Well,
Remember that small black boy who was like a boxing champion in the Olympics? He was 140 pounds. I would never want to fight with him.
No.
This kid was heavier,
My
but still.
grandson was.
I had a buddy who was 140 pounds. You didn't want to cross him.
Okay. Moving along here now. Any more questions on amendment and Second Amendment of the First Amendment?
No.
Well, that First Amendment seems to be the most controversial. To me, it's the most controversial of all of the amendments, the first one.
Okay, why do you
The
say that?
separation of church and state. That started everything. I mean, to me, the separation of church, they're just saying we can't create a religion. It cannot be a state religion. But they didn't say anything that we couldn't be whatever religion we wanted and incorporate it. Now, we're separating it from the government. So that's why they're saying we can't repeat, we can't pray in school, we can't do this, we can't have God anywhere, because it's like we got to take God out of everywhere because of the First Amendment. They're blaming it all on the First Amendment.
Yeah.
That's fancy lawyering is what that is. I understand what you're saying. They said Congress shall make no law which shall establish religion or prohibit the practice thereof.
That's right.
It's like, you know, if like here we say a prayer, we say the Pledge of Allegiance. You know, you're free not to participate in that if you don't want to. There's nobody holding a gun to your son saying you have to do it, huh?
Either way, so they should be able to tell us we can't.
Right, exactly.
That's our argument.
You see, it's like when you go to a football game or a baseball game and they have the Pledge of Allegiance, they have a prayer or something like that. If you don't want to participate in it, just sit in your chair. You don't have to.
Even as a child, and I'm pretty old, we just had a moment of silence then.
Yeah. We did that when I was in school. You had a moment of silence.
We all prayed because my friends were all good Christians, but you didn't have to. They never said you did. They knew we would, but they didn't tell us we had to.
Well, wasn't it one of the Barton films on the church and state? And was it Thomas Jefferson? The churches were worried that our government was going to interfere with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Jefferson that said there would always be a wall between the two, and that the government would never infringe upon the church, because they'd had all that in England. They didn't, you know. They
Right, yeah. State-sanctioned religion.
They're trying to do it right now, too.
He said that after he was out of office because he realized when he was in office there was a statement he made that was misinterpreted, and he thought it would be most important that he make that clear that that's not exactly what he meant. So he did come back, but that's why they pick on Jefferson, because they took that statement while he was in office, and it was not intended what he actually meant.
Well, the big thing is going to be with the Catholics now, and that's just started. I don't know if you've been keeping up with the bishops in the Catholic Church are now, you know, because in the Obamacare they're going to require certain things that are against the religion of the Catholics. And so if the Catholics have to stand up and say there's a separation here, you cannot tell us what we can or cannot do.
No,
the minute they will do that, then
that.
we're all finished.
Yeah.
We no longer have our freedom of religion.
Right.
And that's how close we are right now, though.
I
Because
agree.
Yeah, because, so we have to do something about it before.
It's so simple.
It comes
There
back.
should be no argument. Of course, that's what we have.
But they find ways,
Muddy.
every little word,
Muddy.
they find ways to twist things around.
All the clauses.
We had an
All the
atheist.
clause, right.
We had an atheist by
Double
Barrington
barriers.
that was quite wealthy and quite vocal.
Mhm.
So a town, since I was a kid, had a cross on a water tower. I mean, big deal. He forced him to take it off. So everybody that could put a cross on their garages, which was on the highway. He got rid of one. We ended up with thousands overnight. Thousands, not a few. The whole friggin' road for 20 miles had crosses.
Well, that's like that one guy in California that he was an atheist. His son was going to school saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and he didn't like his kid having to say under God. He challenged it before the Supreme Court. It's like, you know, like, get over it.
Shut your mouth
just
if you
don't-
don't wanna say it.
If you don't want to say it, just shut your
But
mouth.
it
Yeah.
says little piece by piece by piece are eroding. this
Right,
whole
see, that's what they
First
do, small
Amendment.
increments
Just
at a
eroding it.
time, very small
It's
increments.
the original plan, the Illuminati, again, I'll use that word, hundreds of years ago, they said, we don't care how long it takes, but we will win. And they have to do the first simple things, disarm, get rid of religion, and get rid of
Morality.
morality, morality. They can't win with a
Secularizing
religious
the
armed public.
Right,
They can't win. It's right in their papers.
Yeah,
right.
well,
That's what they're pushing
Just
for.
gotta use our heads.
I agree.
You can shove it down their throat the way they are ours, just keep twisting it back on them.
That's
And never answer a question without a question.
yeah,
It'll
that's
go
true.
forever.
Well, it's
If
in,
anybody asks you a question, just ask them a question. Because they can't answer, just keep asking, don't answer, ask a question.
That's good. Okay, any more questions on that?
no,
Yeah.
do you have any? It's
The
interesting.
Army guy, our Air Force guys are tricky.
Yeah. Okay, Amendment 3. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law.
Yeah.
Okay, this is kind of like, doesn't really apply anymore.
They took his house.
Right. After the Boston Tea Party, the Quartering Act of 1774 was enacted. It became known as one of the intolerable acts, and that pushed the United States towards, pushed the colonies towards revolution. What they were doing was, you ever heard of the Hessians, German mercenaries? They were bringing them in, and they didn't have enough quarters for all of them. So what they were doing was they were forcing the colonists to take in one at a time and live there, and let the guy live in your house and all that. And of course, he's privy to all your conversations and who your friends are, who's coming and who's going, and they didn't like that. Patrick Henry said, as a matter of fact, when they pushed for the Bill of Rights, Patrick Henry pushed very hard for this, because he meant that was one of their biggest complaints they had against the former government, was that, and it infuriated them. That was one of the biggest reasons they had for breaking the bonds with Britain, was that. It's like basically shoving their people in with us like that.
Well, I think Amendment 4 also speaks to that,
Right, it does.
because it talks about the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures.
Mm-hmm.
That certainly,
They certainly were wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were.
When you read this, you know.
Obama's group went against that too when they went ahead and went into the guitar people in California. And they took because of the wood or something like that.
The wood.
The wood was made.
Oh, that's right, he's almost out of business.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
He
right.
is.
So what, no, what's
He is out of business.
what's that,
Gibson.
Well, Obama said he doesn't like this, it slows him down.
Their wood.
He can't accomplish
Just in the
it.
past couple of
He hates
years,
this thing.
they've been
Obama
targeted
hates
for
the
using
Declaration
the
of
wood
Independence.
that they've been using for years.
You would have said he
Just
wished
about
he'd rather
shut
be
down.
president of China, because they don't have any rights.
Got it.
I wish he was too.
This is one of the least cited sections of the Constitution. To be honest with you, I had never really known anything about it because it hasn't recurred since the American Revolution. We haven't had that problem. We haven't been occupied, fortunately, since the American Revolution, so we haven't had to deal with that.
well,
Which one, number 4?
3?
Number 3.
Number 3,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, number 4, you got to worry about
Oh,
that.
yeah.
It's already had one.
What about the
Yeah.
Civil War?
Three was, I
Did
was
you have
just
any
gonna
problem
say, in
there?
the Civil War, I think,
They problem Civil
they
War?
went into people's homes.
Oh, they absolutely did.
Yeah, they
With this
did.
Union went into Confederate homes?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they did.
Did.
That's right, they did.
They
Absolutely.
They had
They burned them out after
took
they
the
Well, yeah, they looted him. Well, yeah.
They
No,
did.
they stayed
Yeah.
there.
It's not the same.
And there are horses in there and everything.
Yeah, they took
In
the
Alabama.
horses in and they built.
So Victor becomes his
Beautiful,
slaves.
everything, burned their crops.
Well, now, when Sherman did that, he did it for a reason.
Uh-huh.
You see?
But it was done I mean.
Yeah.
Gone with the wind.
Okay, now let me explain. I got into an argument and I almost got my head separated from my shoulders with the southern gentleman over this.
Okay.
Sherman's march to the sea, we're getting off point here a little bit, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
It's okay, we're learning.
Yeah, you see, what Sherman was sick and tired of the Civil War. He wanted to bring it to an end. But in order to do that, he had to bring the Confederacy to its knees. So what he did, when he destroyed Atlanta, he burned Atlanta to the ground, he burned their crops, he burned their homes, their barns, he cut a path of destruction all the way to the sea, to Savannah. What he was doing when he did that is he was like thumbing his nose at the Confederacy, saying, look at me, I can go anywhere I want to go, I can do whatever I want to do, and you can't stop me, there's nothing you can do. And he was right. The Army of Northern Virginia was too far away to do anything about it, and the Army of the Carolinas is otherwise occupied. He broke the will of the Confederacy is what he did, and brought about an end to the Civil War.
Oh, yeah.
In the end, he saved lives.
He saved lives, yeah. You know, people look at Sherman as a war criminal and all that, and it's like when Harry Truman dropped the A-bomb on Japan. They call him a war criminal for doing that, but they can't. You see what happened like at Iwo Jima, how many people died, how many Marines we lost just taking a stupid island like that. And when they were getting ready for the home islands of Japan there, and the military went to Harry Truman and they said, okay, this is going to take another year, it's going to cost 1 million lives on both sides. And Harry Truman was like, no, this isn't going to cut it. We got to have another way of doing this. So they said, okay, we got this new kind of bomb, it looks pretty impressive, let's use this. He said, okay, let's do that. And even Truman had no idea what it was going to do. Nobody really had an idea how bad it was going to be.
They didn't know about the radiation at the time.
Right, they didn't know any of that stuff. They dropped it on there.
When the Japanese came to us later and said the side effects, they thought they were lying at first.
Right.
They didn't know that would happen. And
Yeah,
Madame Curie died of radiation poisoning.
Yeah.
They didn't know that. Like, we dropped the first one on Hiroshima, we dropped it again on Nagasaki, and they finally got the hint. They surrendered. It's like, you know, like they say everybody's a war crime or a war criminal. It's like, you got to do that.
You know, they had armed everybody in Japan just before they happened.
They did. They handed out weapons to everybody. They were telling them to fight to the last man, woman, and child.
Millions died both ways.
Yeah, if they had gone through with the conventional invasion like they had wanted to, that would have been a disaster.
It would have been horrible.
It would have been horrible, yeah. You didn't like wiping out the whole country.
Have you ever seen the photos of Nagasaki and Hiroshima?
I've seen pictures of them, yes.
They're just beautiful.
Yeah, they're better now than they were.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, now I thought they after they dropped the bomb.
No, today.
Oh, no, I haven't seen it.
They make our cities look like hell.
They showed Nagasaki, okay, and then they showed Detroit.
Detroit, yeah.
Oh, well.
Really?
That's a treat.
Wow.
That's
The
right.
best way to get ahead is to
Let's
lose
say
to
that.
America.
I know it. We pay for everything.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you, Mr. President Johnson.
Yeah, okay, now we're moving along to Amendment 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now this is open to a lot of interpretation. There are things like sobriety checkpoints. They use this to make sobriety checkpoints legal. Now, I personally have a problem with sobriety checkpoints. I don't like that, but the Supreme Court said otherwise. It's the same thing like mandatory drug testing in the workplace. I got a problem with that, but the Supreme Court said otherwise. So, anybody want to comment on that, or
Well, you know, I would think that, well, I know they say secure in their persons, but I had never thought of that as being something that they would be talking about, like sobriety and drug searches and things like that. I took it as being secure in your home more than anything else.
Yes, go ahead.
The secure in your person's house and paper, they're saying that that's, Amendment 4 as one of the things they're stepping on with the health care. Because you know that the government is paying the doctors to transfer all of their information, all patients, into an electronic thing. The other day I went to the doctor and he had no files left in that big room wherever you go to check in. And I said to him, I've already asked him about this before, I said, where are all the files? And she says, oh, they're all now on the computer.
Oh,
That's
dear
a
God.
violation. It's you know, on your papers, because what it now allows is that now
Oh, my
the
goodness.
federal government, under HHS, she can go in, Sebelius, and they can now look at your records. They can determine your illness, and they can determine what kind of care you're going to get.
My wife works in medical records, and she said they transferred everything to computer because it's just everything's getting away from paper. It's going paperless
No, no,
now.
no.
I think it's
This is all part of
It's
the
all- But what's happening is now it's access to everything.
Yes.
I thought that, I gotta ask her about that. I thought that was secure.
One of my neighbors is a nurse,
Mhm.
and she and I have talked about this, and she said the government is paying the doctors in her area $40,000 to have the information on computer within, by the end of this year or the end of last year. So.
What about the Privacy Act?
And getting
Well,
ready
see,
for it.
so that's what it is, you know, when you sign the little thing, the doctor can't call and just leave a message on your home phone, who do you want us to give your information to in an emergency? Well, now they'll be giving your information to the federal government. They'll
Oh,
have
God.
access to that. That's one of the,
That's a big.
that's one of the,
Here's something to think about.
the amendments that they're
They are,
adding.
they are adding hundreds of thousands of people to the, to have the ability to go to doctors without increasing one doctor. But he's hired, what, 15,000 more lawyers to make sure we do it, Obamacare, but not one new doctor. I don't think I would have spent all that money at Northwestern to become a dentist if I saw this was going to be what I did. I would have stayed an actuary.
Yeah.
Why would I want to be a doctor? My son hates it already.
I'm sure.
Oh, God.
Just,
It's that bad
It's
already.
getting worse.
Wow.
I retired in 2002 and my wife worked there in the office. She was getting sick of it already.
All the paperwork
Yeah.
and all that.
It's getting
all
worse and worse. In the
the-
beginning, you just fixed the tooth, got paid, and they left. And you got your chicken or whatever it took.
Yeah.
I traded all I could. I didn't want money.
Services,
I traded for
Yeah, you
everything.
should.
Kitchens, car work, food at restaurant, I would pay. I don't want
Might
money.
end up that way.
Okay, now move along to Amendment 5. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be put twice in jeopardy of life and limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation.
They do this though, too.
Yeah, they do.
What's the name of that bar? They took these people's properties because they wanted to put it.
Eminent domain.
Eminent domain. They just.
Now, they have to pay you fair market value, they
What's
say for
their
that.
opinion?
What's their opinion of fair market value?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, now there's one thing interesting in here that I find rather interesting. This one clause, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb.
That's double.
Double jeopardy. You can't be tried twice for the same crime. Yet it's very interesting how you can be tried in state court for a crime, and if you were acquitted, they turn right around and they charge you in federal court with the same crime. But they say that's not double jeopardy because it's two different courts. Now, to use an example here, you
I
remember
never
before...
realized that.
OJ.
Now, just as an example here, you guys remember Rodney King beating, the LA riots?
Yes.
The policemen that arrested Rodney King, when they were acquitted by the courts, whenever they were acquitted and the LA riots started, President Bush turned right around and had them charged in federal court with the exact same thing. Now, at the time that happened, I said, that's double jeopardy. You can't do that. And a lot of other people said, that's double jeopardy. And they had a lawyer on TV. I never researched this, but he said, no, it's because it's federal court. It's a different court.
They did that to OJ. He lost in the federal court, but civil, they sued him for everything.
But that's
Right.
civil.
But you
see, that was civil court.
But it wasn't.
Well, that's
you see, he was
something else
charged-
again. That's something else
It's a
again,
different
yeah.
crime.
That's
You see,
not
now that's
capital
another thing.
offense.
Now, he was charged in state court and he was acquitted, but he was not charged in federal court. He got away with
There were
it.
3 different ways, yeah.
Yeah. Also, what else was there I was going to mention with that?
Obama, you know, this past couple of months or whenever he's passed for an executive order, whatever he's done, that he can arrest anybody without real cause. I mean, like first it was talking about in Europe, but now that some of the discussion is that they can, if you're walking down the street and they think they have an issue with you, they can take you. So, I mean, this has just been the last couple of months. Judge Napolitano's been talking about
Unless
it.
you're a Mexican or illegal, then they won't touch you.
Right, well, no, of course not.
Yeah, we gotta look Spanish and have an accent, we won't be bothered for anything.
Yeah,
We don't have
you're
to
just,
pay your taxes. You can vote
White
twice.
Anglo walking down the
Vote three
street, yeah.
times.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
Isn't that before the Supreme Court right now
It's going to.
What's that?
Come up.
about the
Immigration.
immigration?
I don't
Tomorrow,
know.
starts tomorrow.
Oh,
Yes.
oh, for
Yes, I saw
Arizona?
something in the paper today about that, I think. Yeah.
I thought the states had the right to do what they're saying Arizona doesn't. I always thought, my little mind, that the states always had the ultimate right.
The states have the right.
Because otherwise, it's useless.
But everybody can cross this.
But Obama's
That's it.
taking it in his hands to sue the state.
So I should
He's
think
suing
Arizona should have every
Alabama.
right. You know what they said, wait, this is what they said today, now that I'm thinking, it doesn't always work, but they are going to, if they lose, they are going to then, at their own expense, build a fence of their own, and I guess they can't stop that. And they will guard it themselves.
The federal
You mean
government does not have the right to sue Arizona over. You see, it is the federal government's
Or Alabama.
responsibility to protect us. It's one of the enumerated powers at the beginning here, to protect us against invasion, against foreign
You would think
invasion,
so.
repel danger. That's part of what they're supposed to do. They're shirking that duty.
Absolutely.
He does opposite.
It's one of the main.
And because they don't do it, the state of Arizona is taking up the slack and doing it, and they're going after him. That's illegal. He's committed a number of impeachable offenses, but it's like, you impeach him, the Senate won't convict him because he's a majority Democrat.
They've left Alabama, they're not even having a problem.
That's like telling me I can't put a burglar on my house because it would interfere with the burglar. It's the same difference.
That's right.
The state is their home. They
Right.
can't put a burglar on in their state.
Exactly. Did you want to say something, Doris?
No, I'm just saying.
Go ahead.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
I mean, they're suing Alabama now for the law they passed, but they have just left.
All the illegal aliens?
Yeah.
That was that.
I'm sure not all of them, but a lot of them.
That was that ID thing, to check your ID to make sure you're valid to work in the state. You see, that's another thing I can't understand. That's the state's right. That's not an enumerated power. That has nothing to do with the federal government. That's a state.
So he needs
Well, actually,
to vote.
they need to do that. They need to be enforcing that. They're not. So the states are taking up the slack, and now he's getting mad at them for doing it.
Well, Obama needs their votes.
Right, he needs their votes, right.
I think it's anybody that's stopped in a traffic can be checked to be, I think that's the way it is.
They're
Well, they can check to see if you have a driver's license. What the hell's the difference?
Through the enforcement of the legality of being able to stop, them in traffic or violations or whatever, or just suspicion of stuff. So they're saying what they're trying to do, rather than the costs of actually taking these illegals and putting them back in the country, we're trying to, in essence, squeeze them out. Attrition through enforcement.
Our economy's so bad they're leaving on their own. They can't keep
That's
working
right,
for you.
that is exactly right. I saw
We're
something
trying to
about that
squeeze
too
them
today.
out on
It
their
is
own
working
volition.
because,
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be working.
I
That's
just read in
good,
the paper more were leaving than coming. It's
Oh, yeah, they
the
are.
first time that's happened.
Really?
there
Yes.
really is no
Time in
work for
history that has
anybody,
happened.
so why would they stay?
If you look at the number, if you go on and look at the number for illegals coming over into our country for the past, I don't know how many years, 10, 15 years, it's always been 12 million. 12 million, that's the number.
Every year, 12 million?
Yeah,
They
12
keep
million,
saying
it's
it's
never
12
changed. I don't know, the government
said
just
there's
telling them,
20
say
million.
12 million. If you
More
know,
than
12
that.
years ago, it was 12
I
million.
get you.
And you know what, if you look
Some
on the
bullshit.
Democrat sites, and what they're trying to flip around the wording, what the horrible GOPs are trying to do, we're trying
To have
to
peace
slight
and order
the
and
immigrants. And our
jobs.
country was one who accepted immigrants. They leave out the word
Legal.
Right,
That's
My
exactly
family
right.
went through Ellis Island even.
right,
They-
Yeah,
exactly.
they would have got in if
All
they
of
had
their
a
sites.
sponsor.
This is
None of
what
my
they're
family
doing.
could come here from
And
Europe
this
without a
is what they're
sponsor.
doing in the schools, and this
I
is
get it.
what they're selling our kids.
To keep us out there.
They're very adept at that, leaving out that word illegal. Like, I have no problem with someone coming here legally. A lot of the guys at my job are legal
I'm only
immigrants from
second generation.
Yugoslavia. I got no problem with that. They're here legally, fine. Just don't be illegal. You broke the law to get into this country.
Right.
Don't expect me to respect
That's
your
what I keep
rights.
seeing in the paper, what don't you understand about illegal?
Right, exactly.
Well,
It's not a sick word.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my father came here in 1925 from Germany, and I remember asking him about why he came. And he said, well, I was too young to fight in one of the wars, and I wasn't about to fight in the next one. I said, in 1925?
Yeah.
He said, oh yes. He said Hitler and his brown shirts were down in Munich and those places. And he said, you know, and his sister had come over, and she died in childbirth. And then he had an uncle that was in Massachusetts. So he went, but he was very proud. He didn't speak a word of English, and he had to get himself. He didn't come steerage. He didn't have to go through Ellis Island, but he got himself, without speaking a word of English, from where the ship landed in New York to Massachusetts, and where his uncle lived. And that was, you know, really.
My grandmother said she came here with a cup and a spoon and steerage and a blanket.
Yeah, well, yeah, but, yeah, he had $2,000 with him, which was a lot of money in those days.
Yeah.
So the Germany was under the reparations from World War I
Yeah.
during that
Yeah.
time,
That was
right?
Weimar, it was, kind of like.
The Weimar Republic, yeah.
They were starting to get that.
Oh, yeah.
That was where you had to have a
Well, he
suitcase full of
actually-
money just to buy a
Where
loaf of
his
bread. you know.
family ended up with became the
That's
Russian
right,
settle.
they kept evaluating, changing the money by the hour. Women
Right.
did have to take a wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
Right,
One of
you
my
had to take a
patients
wheelbarrow to
he
buy
was there at
something.
that
Yeah.
time, one of my patients.
That
It's
baby
true.
coming here.
Yeah,
It's
I
too
mean,
good, baby.
it was the banks, I mean, they kept
Oh, they should do it with the
renegotiating.
banks.
the-
Well, that's
They
what's
paid
happening to
Social
Europe
Security
today
twice
with
a
the
day.
euro.
Because he was a pilot.
Okay,
Yeah, they did.
any other comments on amendment, on the Fifth Amendment?
No.
All right, now we go to the Sixth Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Now this is interesting here, to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Because I can remember, like, was it Gideon versus Wainwright when I was in high school and we took like American law. It was like before a certain time, if you were charged with a crime, you didn't get a lawyer automatically. You had to pay for one, you had to represent yourself.
Oh, really?
And a lot of people got thrown in jail for that. And the person went to court over it, and I believe the guy's name was Gideon. And it was Gideon versus Wainwright. It went to the Supreme Court, and that's where they ruled that you have to be appointed a lawyer if you can't afford one at no cost to you. Now, I never knew this before I read the Sixth Amendment here, that you had the assistance of counsel, because it used to be you never got anything.
You should have weighed in from this.
Right from way back then, you should have gotten a public defender if you could not afford a counsel.
That's
It
true.
should have taken so long.
Wow.
Whatever happened to Speedy after the trial,
Yeah.
going to the death chamber should be speedy.
Yeah.
I think it should be as quick as the guy who murdered the person. He should be put away about that quick.
You know, like Oscar Ray
What about
Moore,
19
yeah.
years they're sitting there at our expense?
Yeah,
I think it
agree.
should be the same day. And I'll volunteer my guns and bullets. I'll be a very poor shot. I'll start at the ankles and work up.
To be confronted with the witnesses against him,
Yes.
is that the other name of,
You have the right to know the
Habeas
names.
corpus?
You have the right to
Is that
know the name
habeas
and the
corpus?
face of your accuser. Like if someone says, "I accuse you of stealing me," and you get arrested
Right.
for it, then you have the right to know who accused you, what their name is, and all that, the nature of the accusation
Yeah.
against you.
Because otherwise, somebody could just behind your
Like
back.
just be hiding
say
behind my back,
something.
like so and so
Oh,
said you
have no
did this.
idea.
Well, who was it? Like, well, we can't tell you that. Like, no, you can't do that.
Well, that's what's happening in
But that can be
the
abused.
trade.
Okay, let's move on here. Amendment 7. In suits in common law where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall otherwise be re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of common law.
That's interesting. I wonder if that $20 still exists.
So they
I wonder what that
it'd be
would be.
20,000.
Yeah, you'd have to take
Yeah.
inflation
Maybe
into account.
200,000.
Oh, I don't know. I
They
mean,
got a
that's
site,
what-
you can go back and see what money was. And when I was a kid, $1 an hour was $9 an hour.
Any questions on that one, on Amendment 7? No. Okay, Amendment 8. This is an interesting one.
Interesting one.
Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Okay, now I got a problem with this right now. I haven't had a chance to research this one yet, but what I don't understand is like asset forfeiture laws. That is a direct violation of excessive bail shall not be required, like fines. Now, when I'm talking about like asset forfeitures, you guys know what I'm talking about?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay, like they originally passed these laws, like they had these big time drug cartels that like make millions of dollars from cocaine profits. The government steps in and seizes their assets. Okay, that's fine. But now they've taken that law to where like they had, like if you get caught with like a roach, a marijuana, a small
They're taking
marijuana
cars
cigarette,
in
they
some
can take your
states,
car.
Yeah, yeah. In prostitution, they do the same now.
They do the same thing with
Cars.
prostitution. Exactly. There was a case in Michigan about that. They can seize your
It's up
car.
to the state itself, yeah.
You see, that I got a problem with.
If you have a prostitute in your car, they can
If you pick up a prostitute in your car, they can legally seize your car and you never get it back. It's gone. It's asset forfeiture.
Never
They didn't get Charles Barkley's.
till they,
But in my case, I wouldn't need it. I'd be dead anyway.
Yeah, so would I, but yeah.
It's irrelevant.
I've never heard of that.
That's interesting.
If, like, somebody in your back seat happened to have
a drug of some
or
sort.
something.
Right. You could be
and you
completely
were
unaware of
stopped- You
that.
were stopped for a traffic violation, and they found that for some reason.
They can legally impound your car. They seize it and that's
Do
it.
they
It's
do it
gone.
automatically or could legally?
There could, it depends on the judge, they could,
I think they do.
That's something I got to look into because I didn't get a chance to get that far, and because I'm like real curious about that. From what I've read on that, they can't. Police departments can do that. They can seize your assets like that. Like I said, I got a problem with that.
Yeah,
that's a little vague, I mean, they can be abused, yeah.
Right. They go anywhere. It depends on what judge you go before, what courts you're in, things like that.
But the thing is, every kid that's ever been caught with drugs in the house, they were always holding it for a friend.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's where you're going, from one end to the other, you know.
Right.
Well,
Exactly.
they also use cruel and
Okay.
unusual punishment where they've been fighting against having the injection death sentence. The
I
injection
don't
were
see where that's
considered
cruel and unusual punishment.
If I did, it would be cruel.
Well,
Yeah.
That's gentle.
I mean, I don't think how that could be cruel, but that's what,
Eye for an eye, it's right in the
That's why they've
Bible,
been-
eye for an eye. I would
Okay,
like
now
to-
my idea of cruel and unusual punishment would be crucifixion. Now I think
Yes.
that's cruel and
They did that
unusual
to
punishment.
Jesus, so.
Now that might have been what the founding fathers had in mind when they, or what Madison had in mind,
So they would
like
never-
nailing someone to a cross and you hang there until you're dead. To me, that is the epitome of cruel and unusual
I
punishment.
would believe you, because they were all such Christians, so they were
Yeah,
the first thing.
that's probably what they had in mind. Now, like hanging, I don't see I mean, when I lived in Washington State, they hung two guys at the state prison, and the reporter that watched it said it was actually very humane. They put the noose around the guy's
That
neck,
snaps, right?
they pulled the lever, he fell through. The minute he hit the end of that rope, that was it. He was dead. Snapped his neck instantly, and he was dead. It was very painless.
Yeah, but
Did you
back
hear
in
about the
those-
guy playing Judas in a play somewhere? He just died by accident. Being Judas, yeah. They said he committed suicide. I doubt it. I think he was hung by his friends.
Yeah.
Well, you know, back in those countries, back in Europe, I mean, they would cut off.
That was another example of cruel and unusual punishment that they had in mind.
Guillotine.
They would
But that
cut
was
off,
quick.
well, tongues.
That was another example they had. Yeah, like if you
Tar and feather.
in the Middle Ages, right? In the Middle Ages, if you were caught stealing, they cut off your hand. That was something else they
Sharia
talked
law,
about.
still,
Yeah.
India, the
it's
right
still
hand.
working. Sharia
Right,
law.
yeah. They would cut out an eye. That was considered cruel and unusual punishment.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
That's. Thank you for bringing that up. That was another one.
Well, what in here?
Move along here now to Amendment 9. Any more questions on the 8th Amendment?
no.
Okay. Amendment 9. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people.
I don't understand that.
I gotta admit that's a little confusing to me too. I haven't had a chance to look at that one.
No, I don't understand that one.
Enumeration of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by, others' rights, I assume, retained by the people.
Right.
So in other words, if
There's
I
more than
understand
rights,
it,
yeah.
that it doesn't have to just be,
Like my rights end where your rights begin.
well, no, what I'm looking at is,
So we have more,
we don't, it doesn't have to be all spelled out in the Constitution.
Right.
And in other words, I may have other rights.
The laws may be passed, additional
Right.
laws.
Yeah,
That is confusing.
Yeah, that is.
That's confusing. I gotta look that one up.
but I would think that would be what it means, that there would not be, you couldn't be denied or disparaged other rights that you have.
Oh, you're not supposed to take those rights to do evil with,
Right.
like you're saying they're doing now.
Yeah.
See, they're twisting things. They're trying to say not to do what they're doing.
Mhm.
Oh, so this
I
is.
thought it was.
That's the
that-
only one I think Obama
that
knew was this one.
These are enumerated rights, but
Listed.
these are not our only rights.
That's
We
what,
No,
have-
they're
that's
not our
exactly
only
what,
rights. They're
that's
enumerated, but they're
exactly
not
what
our only
I'm
rights.
thinking.
Right.
That's exactly what that's what I would say.
Yeah, at the beginning, the enumerated powers.
Yeah. Okay?
Amendment 10's biggie, there's a whole movement in Alabama.
Yeah, okay. The 10th Amendment. Powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectfully or to the people. That's a big one there. The 10th Amendment is very big. A lot of people think that this was put in there to placate the anti-federalists because they feared a strong central government. They didn't want the government to be able to tell everybody what to do. They wanted the states to have rights. This is like states' rights, basically.
Right.
Okay.
It's like there is no enumerated power saying that the government has the right to force you to have health care. So,
Or not protect your borders. This should protect Arizona.
Yes,
Right,
it
this
does.
should protect
Well, that's
Arizona
what
rights.
Jan Brewer has said, I think, if
Right.
I'm not mistaken.
I bet he's erased that already, Obama. I bet it's
Well,
not-
you know, that's one of the biggest
If
problems
they're
we
not
have.
delegated to the United States, they are reserved
to the
to
states.
the
Right,
states
exactly.
or the people.
Oh, so it's not federal.
So they do
also
have the right to
states.
build that fence if they have.
Sure, if they,
I would say they, you see, actually now they're supposed to provide for the common defense of the United States, the enumerated powers at the beginning here.
yeah.
Well, they'd be like us having in St. Pete to hire our own police force because they wouldn't protect us. And that's just what the government's doing. They're not
Right.
protecting us.
Yeah. Well, you have to be very careful about one of the
I
things,
think this is who brought about the
executive order.
immigration thing and. Amendment
You
10.
can't call illegal trespass immigration at all. It's attacking the United States. They are not legal in any way. They are no better than an army attacking.
Well, that's true.
They don't belong here.
No,
You can't call them
we're spending so much
immigrants at
money.
all. They're
No.
just illegal. Take away the immigrant.
Yeah.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's not only the Mexicans that are coming through.
No.
It's
No,
all over.
no.
Yeah.
Well, you see, that's
They have
the
a
thing
certain
now, like the
name
first
on the
time you have a
others.
terrorist attack on
certain
American
name.
soil and they found out they come through Mexico, Obama's toast.
Yes.
Because the Mexican border right now is very
Civ.
porous.
It's a civ, yeah.
What about
Yeah.
Canada? Is that
Canada's harder to get through.
Oh, yeah,
Canada
Canada
actually
is
wants
You have to
to
have a
get
visa now either way.
Well, that's the problem.
To get in and out
That
of
they come
Canada.
here
Now,
on
when I used to go there, we
student
just used our
visas and
driver's
tourist
license
visas.
and a
They
statement.
expire
There's some
and are,
parts
we
Nobody
do
keeps
not
track
go.
of
Nobody keeps an eye on
No
that,
man.
right.
Just so they're here.
You just,
Oh, I didn't know
You
that.
just
We
have
always
to
got
pay.
caught by the
no,
man.
there's some unmanned booths
Because I had way too much liquor one
on
day. It
some of
cost
the
a
borders,
fortune.
and you just put something in and you go across.
Well, you could not bring a gun into Canada legally.
No.
I don't believe you
No,
can.
I know you couldn't.
Oh, I don't know. I've never tried to.
Well, you know
Well, we
me, I
had a
tried.
motorhome and
We had a motorhome and I had a gun.
because we were, we were going to different places all along the way, and then we crossed over the border into Canada.
And I had an
We
M1
were
with me, so what I
told
did was I
we had
took the
to-
heat duct apart behind the sofa.
What'd you have to do, leave your gun with them?
You're mean.
Well,
Well, I would have to leave it with my
we were
uncles, but I
told in
forgot.
advance.
Oh, so you knew not to
We
take
knew.
it?
I knew not to, but I forgot it was there.
Goodness.
Okay, any questions on the Bill of Rights? Anything we've covered so far?
I think we need a few more.
Yeah.
I think we need to repeal a few of these, but we'll get to that
Repeal and
next session.
I think we could write a few good
Trying
ones
to
to get rid
repeal
of a few.
19? What's that one?
I'd like to see the 16th and the 17th repealed, but...
Yeah. Well,
I'll have to look
Okay,
up.
so we're going to stop here then on
Let's
Amendment
talk about
10.
that next week, the 16th and 17th.
Yeah, okay.